Lars, thank you so much for joining the Pantrium podcast. I've been looking forward to this dialogue and thank you for joining the show today.
Yeah, I was also really looking forward, and thanks for having me.
And as you know, first question of the day, what's your fun fact? Because let's introduce yourself in a slightly different manner than fancy titles.
Mine is typically I live in Berlin. I usually always work from home, but right now for this podcast, or in the next few weeks, I will be in Mumbai, specifically in the south of Mumbai. My
Very
wife is
exotic.
my wife is from here, so every year, like once a year or something like this, we spend a month in Mumbai, and luckily we both have the opportunity to work remotely. So that's what I'm doing right now. So enjoying a bit more of sun than they was right now in Berlin.
That's fantastic. Speaking of independent, that's what we're going to talk about today, your own journey and how you ventured out in Germany around embedded finance and so on. So we're going to talk about your journey into this space. Welcome to the Pantrium podcast. Here, there's no fluff and no sales pitches, just real conversations. I'm your host, Christy Christensen. And at Pantrium, we bring together bold and curious founders and leaders to share their stories, their lessons they have learned, and the hard truth behind their success. If you're craving deeper conversations, you're in the right space. So let's dive in. So, Lars, can you tell us a little bit more about what has been some of your hardest lessons?
I mean, that's a very good question. I mean, maybe to take a step back, I've been working now, I don't know, over 10 years in what we call fintech. And most of the time, actually, I was an employee of early stage startups. Most importantly, two different startups that I work with. One I joined as the founding team member, like very at the beginning. So I've done a lot of like early stage craziness where you start something and then the next day you have to do something completely different. And obviously you have to be like very versatile in the things you're doing. I think that one of the challenges, obviously, you have to do a lot of things, and you also don't want to remain the person who does everything, right? The challenge is, while I enjoyed that part as well a lot, you kind of at one point have to pick your area, especially when you're young, where you want to go deeper, because at the end of it, while having a lot of different skills can be beneficial as well, very often you need that one skill, that one focus that helps you separate yourself from others in the future. And sometimes this can be, especially in early stage startup, quite hard because there's so many moving targets, so many moving things from left to right. And sometimes you, especially me, put this decision maybe a little bit behind all the other things that are more important. But it's important to answer that question at one point.
No, that's very true, and you do wear a lot of hats in early startups. And can you tell me a little bit more about as you ventured beyond the startup and as you said, you've been working in the fintech scene for a very long time. What are you currently working on?
Yeah, so right now, it's actually also when I was thinking about like how do I introduce myself, right? How do I describe myself? In a way, I'm working right now as an embedded finance advisor. That means I help companies who want to build embedded finance products, help them in their journey. This is very often a company who has little or no knowledge about fintech, but wants to build fintech products. So that's typically where I come in the very early phases to understand the opportunity, open the right doors, and kind of potentially also help with building an MVP before the company then perhaps decides to put more focus on it and hire a specific team. On the other side, I have this, initially it was more of a side project and has been growing a little bit in the last couple of months. The domain I registered back in the days was Embedded Finance Review. I didn't even have like much plan for it, except putting out a bit of embedded finance content, which are mostly a couple of blog posts I've written around the opportunity for embedded finance. Because most specifically in my last role, in my last company, we were doing embedded banking, and while the whole team was like across Europe, I was the only one in Germany, and I was specifically interested to understand what kind of companies are out there who might be not knowing anything about fintech today, but could be offering fintech products tomorrow. And for me, it was quite eye-opening then to understand that there was, I mean, it's not a big surprise maybe, but it was eye-opening for me that there was a big gap between the fintech bubble and everything that's happening maybe in the general tech or outside of the fintech bubble. And there was a very very hard time for the people who potentially could be building great fintech products, but they didn't know where to start. So initially, I just put out a couple of like blog posts where I shared a little bit of like insights around the details of embedded finance.
That's super exciting. And how did you actually end up with embedded finance review?
What's this favorite quote of Steve Jobs? You can only connect the dots when you're looking back. So in a way, I never really had the plan of doing all of these things that I'm doing today. And to be honest, just to be fair, I don't think I have, like with Embedded Finance Review, achieved a lot or like kind of cracked the nut. But I think what I'm seeing right now is with the events, with the subscribers growth, with the podcast listener, there is a certain kind of like indicator that there is an interest out there. To be honest, initially, as I said, like I just wanted to put out a bit of content. But I think I always enjoyed was being the nerd, the expert, and so to say, on certain things, and then sharing this insight and knowledge with the people who needed to build certain products. But it took me myself also quite some time to see that and figure that out.
And I remember when we sat down a couple of weeks ago, you touched upon this moment of identify, should you go by yourself, do it on your own, or should you collaborate with and come together with a co-founder?
Yeah, sometimes I describe myself as a founder of Embedded Finance Review, and then sometimes I wonder, what is even Embedded Finance Review? I mean, is it really a startup? Because I work with founders like every day, and I was very fascinated by that. By being a founder, I always told myself that I want to start a company on my own at one point. And my understanding was always at that point of time, it needs to be a tech company and it needs to be VC funded, because that's the only kind of like companies I knew. I actually found an area which was around like corporate credit cards where I wanted to build something. And I even found somebody with whom I wanted to build this. And I was maybe desperate is a little bit of a stretch of a word, but I had to move on. And then I was like, there was this opportunity, there was this co-founder. So I really focused on this. And to be honest, I was ignoring a bit of like, maybe not red flags, but like yellow flags. In a way, I was kind of ignoring them because I really wanted to make this happen. But after some time, I just realized, in a way, it's like not meant to be that me and this other co-founder are supposed to build something. I'm not going to say, it wasn't the case that I was right or he was wrong or anything like this. It was just the mindset was just very, very, very different. And I just realized at one point, that's not the right setup for me. And then even though, and I think this is a really, really, a really scary decision to make, like when you say no to something, but there's nothing else for you what you can be really doing, right? I mean, if I had the big job opportunity, what I really wanted to do is very simple to say no. But if this is the one thing you had in your in front of you, then it's a really hard thing to say like no. And to be honest, I could have continued with it. It was not impossible to continue. I just like realized sooner or later this will definitely hurt at least one of us. So the decision was definitely right to say no, but it was in a way a pretty scary one as well.
And it takes a lot of strength to realize that and acknowledge that and then act on it.
For sure. I mean, I'm not gonna like talk to. I mean, like make it like put myself too much in a positive light. I think at the end of it, I think the same applies also in every person's life, right? I mean, maybe if you work in a very, very big corporate, it's a little bit lesser, but I've only worked in startups. So my experience is the same, where even if you're a very early stage startup, sometimes there are opportunities in front of you which you can go after. And as a potentially cash constrained startup, you might go after them because this is now the really shiny opportunity that can potentially bring you a lot of money. But the question you should always really be asking you is like for an individual, but also for a company is like, what's your North Star, right? Where do you really want to go? And does it help you?
I find with many of my guests that our previous experiences have been part of shaping how we look at things, look at opportunities, or, how the way we make decisions. Looking back, how has your past experiences shaped the way that you go about things today?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's this book about it. It's called The Score Takes Care of Itself, which is, I mean, I'm not really into American football, but it's basically about this American football coach who I think at this team of like San Francisco, he took over and basically like turned around completely. And I think the learning or the story from that is in a way, when you look at some of these like developments of companies, or you make decisions, and I mean, making decision is one thing, but then seeing what happens after the decision, right? I mean, there's the input, the output, and the outcome, right? And at the end of it, it's obviously you should always measure or you should always look at the outcome, and that's what really matters. I think the important piece that I've learned over some of the things is that maybe not when you're super early in your career, but at one point you probably have built up enough of like knowledge and understanding that you should probably focus a lot more on the input, because I don't know if some of the listeners maybe also know this analogy of like playing poker. When you play poker, sometimes you do the wrong decision and you win the hand, and sometimes you do the right decision and you lose the hand, right? Like the right decision in terms of like statistics and probability, right? So in a way, I think it's when the outcome is not as expected, you could technically go back and say like, I should have done something different. I should have decided something differently. And sometimes that's the case, but I think sometimes that's what I learned in some of the things I'm doing is sometimes you do the right thing and the thing that happens afterwards is not what you want it to be. So it shouldn't always affect the next decision you're doing.
Yeah. And do you then do retrospectives to reflect on whether or not that was the outcome you had wanted to or hoped for, or you anticipated? Do you review after a process, or how do you go about that? Like in practice, how do you bring that to life?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if we have made a decision to work with a certain provider, then obviously it's in every case, it's kind of like a retro perspective that I'm taking either with a client or myself to understand if the selected provider or the product we have built was exactly kind of matching the thing. And this is not easy either, because not like there are like 1,000 companies out there and you can kind of like pick the right one. So sometimes it's the best suiting provider, but there's still some challenges left and right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just a bit of like a retro perspective we're doing quite often, or I'm doing quite often.
And I guess that's also, it goes into the evaluation if you should build, buy, or partner.
Exactly. I mean, that's basically like one of the main questions I'm dealing with, like most of my clients, right? I mean, obviously depends a lot like what kind of financial product they want to build, is it a payment, a banking, or lending product, what kind of environment they're in. Typically, I mean, the clients that I work with, at least at the very first phase, most of the time is not build it yourself, but rather partners, because it's mostly driven by regulated business, like regulated requirements, having the license. So very often it's not even feasible. But of course, also looking at the stage 2 or 3, where improvements can be done through certain things.
When you go through these processes with your clients, what would you say has been some of the biggest aha moments?
It's a good question. When you build the product, sometimes you can get like so deep down and you're building the product, you really focus and you can, okay, this is possible, this is not possible. And you make like decision after decision after decision after decision. Sometimes then it's really important to go back and kind of like, okay, is this still achieving the jobs to be done that we initially started with for this specific consumer or customer, or did we deviate and building now something completely different?
What would you say is the biggest pitfall, the biggest challenge?
The biggest pitfall in general for companies who are not fintechs but want to build fintech products is the assumption that their existing customers will definitely use their financial product just when they offer it. So this is an analogy. I mean, we can maybe use like a brand that's really known from like an Uber or Starbucks. I mean, they all have like very successful financial products out there because they built them really well. But it would be a misunderstanding to assume just because there's an Uber bank account for Uber drivers and an Uber card for drivers, all of them will definitely use it, right? And we have seen that maybe in more concrete examples in Europe, where B2B businesses, like B2B SaaS companies, are building and launching certain payment or banking products, and they just assume like, yeah, my customer will use it when I offer to them because they like my brand so much. I think what they underestimate is very often firstly, the switching cost involved around this, so that when you talk to people, the consumers or the corporates who are using the financial products, a better financial product is most of the time not a key driver for them, it's not turning the business around, so to say.
Yeah.
Oh, here you have a cheaper bank account, you save on transaction fees and all of this, where most of the business owners say like, I couldn't care less. Because this is not gonna like help me overcome the challenges that are standing in front of me, right? But if you build the financial product in a way how you can achieve to improve their workflows, make it faster for them and their team to get the work done, to have more time for other things. That's where it gets really, really, really important. So I think companies, brands, non-financial companies out there who just build a financial product and just believe like customers will come to them because they offer now a financial product. There's a lot of learnings in the past that this is not going to work out. You still need to be building a great product.
What have you seen that where companies have done this successfully, where they do understand their customers and they've been successful in the adoption?
I mean, the simple answer is customer obsession. I think those companies that I refer to right now who fail. I mean, failed is a strong word. I think failing is part of a lot of very successful products in a way. Like you always fail at one point. The question is like, how do you deal with it, right? Yes. But in return of the fail, you get learnings and can improve it. I think that's the important part. No, I think the companies who really succeed at this, they obsess about the customer, and maybe a little bit of a fun, not a fun story, but like I've obviously, as I mentioned, I've obviously worked at infrastructure companies. So I worked at open banking, but for embedded finance, also specifically at this banking as a service provider. And in a way, of course, I was the person who reached out to companies and said like, oh, you should build this new banking product, because now the APIs are available to do this with very little effort. But when the other side, the client or the company is not on the right stage, like it doesn't make sense to force them to do it, because just because the APIs and the technology is available, this shouldn't be the reason you're building this product. Yeah. The reason you built this product is because you have identified that there's this very specific problem for your customer in that regard. And this problem also has a high urgency, because we all know it in our business, in our lives at corporates or startups, is there are a lot of things you should be doing, but the question is like, who are really the most important one that you go after? And if the banking, the financial product is maybe only like very, very further down the line, then maybe it makes more sense to focus on other things. But obviously you need also the knowledge to understand how big the impact of these things can be.
Yeah, for sure. And it's actually one of the topics that a previous guest on the podcast spoke about, Ruben from Shift4, where he talked about you can also be too innovative and too early for the adoption of your customer. And it can almost sometimes in our world of fintech, and it can become too easy that the customer distrusts it and think it's scam. So it's also the balance of, and to your point, like just because you can build it doesn't mean you necessarily have to.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think in a way, like, this is a great thing of that these like new type of providers, specifically in the fintech world, are available. It's like you can do much smaller, I don't know, MVPs or whatever you call them, right? With rather little investment, you can test and verify your hypothesis that you have about your customers, right? You don't need to throw all your money and the success of the company onto it. You can take it as like one of the projects of many, and maybe build an MVP where you don't lock yourself in for a multi-year contract, but basically build something and then test and verify it with your customers. At the end of it, I think this fast cycle is really important.
Can you give an example of where you've seen someone or a company taking that route and done it in a intelligent way, where they can adopt and scale, but without necessarily losing track of what's important?
I've also podcast, and I think my favorite episode is still an interview I did with the founder of a company called Muse. It's like the word news, but with an M instead of the N at the beginning. It's actually a Dutch company. It's providing vertical SaaS software for the hotel industry. And I remember Matt, who was on the podcast, telling me that they eventually, as of today, they are now processing all the payments for the hotel. So basically, they provide the backbone of infrastructure for the hotels basically out there. So whenever you visit one of their hotels, everything like the check-in, the checkout, the payments in between in the restaurant, the bar, everything would work over this platform. And I remember Matt telling me, like, initially when they had this, when they were always partnering initially with the third-party payment provider and basically integrated them, whatever the hotel basically used, and they made it work. And they always felt like they could build a better product, but they all the time said no to it because they felt like they shouldn't be doing this because this is not really, they're really good at. They have no experience in fintech. Nobody of the team has ever built any fintech product, so they should not really be doing it. And I think they've over and over seen the same problem with their clients, and have seen the problem is that we don't own this piece. So eventually they made the decision to first partner with, I think it was a company, I think it was Stripe, initially partner with, and then basically learned it and then went on. And now I think they have a full fintech team, or a big fintech team of like people who is working only on like payments and other financial products. And I think the company is doing something like 50% of their revenue they're doing with financial services, basically. So I think it's always when I look at any kind of company, and I'm not naive, right? I'm not saying like this is the famous saying of Jason Horowitz's partner, Angela Strange, like every company should be a fintech. And I guess, yeah, maybe at one point of time, it's 100, 200 years, and let's define fintech as well. But I think it really depends on the stage the company is in. There are some businesses, and I guess like a vertical SaaS, like an industry ERP is typically much better positioned to offer financial products, specifically payment products, than maybe a CRM, for example, which maybe doesn't have so much touching points with the financial activities of the client.
That actually is a good bridge as we're entering the last part of the podcast. What do you think is going to change, and what do you see is going to be some of the biggest movements in embedded finance over the next couple of years?
I'll be wrong if I don't mention AI, right? I think there are. I mean, again, embedded finance is a very broad term, right? And we're seeing, especially like embedded finance is the umbrella term, and then you have like embedded banking, payments, lending, investment, and insurance under it. And building these products are sometimes like similar, but sometimes also like very, very different, right? I mean, if I pick the banking one, where I spent quite a bit of time with, but I think we also have quite some learnings already. We have seen banking as a service providers already starting many years ago. I mean, a company called Wirecard at one point did it. I think when in Germany, Solaris was founded in 2016, and we had companies even like well before that. The term embedded finance, embedded banking, while it has been around for like decades, picked really up, from my understanding, like around like 2020, 2021. That was already like many years after banking service providers have been available. I think that the change here is that initially, I mean, it really depends who you can serve and who you can target, right? And I think this is basically the continuous change we're seeing in the embedded finance world. Like initially, as a banking as a service company, you couldn't really focus on vertical SaaS or non-financial brands because there were firstly not so many companies available, and secondly, those who were not really interested or didn't really want to offer financial products. So initially, you had, as a banking service company, I mean, like Solaris is a good example. You could only focus on neobanks, on somebody who wants to build the next N26 or Monzo ever, right? And now, a couple of years later, you realized this is not really a sustainable business model, because these companies either go bankrupt or are so successful that they move away from you, right? And now we're basically in this embedded banking movement where the providers have completely adapted to this new customer group. That means a different product, different marketing, different storytelling. And I do wonder if this is already, and I have my doubts it is, this is already like the final stadium. It's probably never really anything is a final stadium. So I guess we'll be seeing more providers who focus on certain use cases and elements and do them really, really well. We're still seeing today banking as a service / embedded banking provider who do like everything in quotation mark. And probably it's more about taking on more of the feature functionalities that are maybe not core of a banking as a service, but it makes sense for the customers you are addressing. And I think mentioned like AI, I think this is something that will definitely have a lot of impact around process optimization, operation optimization. Specifically, I mean, one of the key challenges that many fintechs and non-financial brands have is obviously onboarding their customers, verifying their identity, all of this. This is where AI kind of is coming from like two sides. On the one hand, can potentially or it will definitely help these companies to improve some of the processes and make it more efficient. On the other side, anybody who spent a bit of time on LinkedIn will probably have seen a fake receipt from a restaurant transaction, or even more a fake governmental ID passport, ID document that's being created by AI. So obviously today maybe we can still like very easily see that they are fake, but over time they will be getting better and better. And this is obviously also creating a challenge for these companies to invest more. AI can potentially help with that as well. But yeah, I think overall, specifically like process and operation optimization will be something to improve a lot around here.
What would you advise others that are listening in, that are leaning towards this and do see that this is gonna be a future opportunity? What do you advise them to think about?
I think it's the first action should be to dive into the fintech ecosystem to understand a little bit more, because yes, you can potentially hire people like me, but this is not going to be the thing you can do. You should be doing forever, and you as a team, especially the leaders who are building these things, should have a very good understanding of these things and not just hiring. You shouldn't be hiring just a former fintech person and let that person drive it, because that person doesn't have any experience about your customers and where you're coming from. So I think it's really, really important that a leader from that specific company is taking over and is basically equipping themselves with the knowledge, learning from peers. Like, I mean, you can do it with content and events, but like go out there, look at companies that are maybe not necessarily your direct competitors in your home market, but look at similar companies outside of your home market who maybe have done something. Look at companies that are completely different industries, but somehow have things that are similar to your companies, and look at like what they are building, how they're building it, understand these things. And I think that's important to gain all this knowledge and network, because even though you're not doing it today or tomorrow, it takes time also to acquire all that knowledge and do all of this. So I think it definitely makes sense. I mean, if you're spending today time to kind of understand AI and dive into AI and learn about these things, if you think or believe like embedded finance is going to be like a big impact, you should probably doing the same thing and learning on the go, even though it might maybe still take you a couple of months or a year or two until you actually build the product, but it takes time.
Yeah. And speaking of inspiration and be challenged and think outside your own box as well, who do you follow that inspire and provoke your thought and start kind of thinking beyond your own patterns?
Again, I have a lot of people that I follow in the fintech ecosystems who basically write about the stuff that I'm like particularly interested in. There's a person called Simon Taylor from Fintech Brain Foods who puts great stuff out there. Alex Johnson with Fintech Takes. Jason from Fintech Business Weekly. I think those are like my three like people that I read on the most regular basis. What I particularly from my situation that I'm in right now, what I love doing, and I kind of said it before as well, I try to go outside of my own fintech bubble. Like what I'm basically trying to build with embedded finance review, or what I could be potentially building. I don't know what I want to build, but what I could be building. I try to specifically look outside of the fintech bubble and connect with people who, and I think I've seen that's quite a bit now. And I think it's a really, really interesting opportunity for a lot of people is this whole B2B tech ecosystem. There's so many niche topics where you can basically I would say rather simple. I mean, simple is still a couple of years or something like this, become an expert in certain things, and you can build up a network, a community, and maybe you don't even need to be the biggest expert in the industry, but if you are the one building content, the voice, maybe host events and all the other things left and right around it, I think there's a massive opportunity. So I'm looking a lot at these things as well. I've been looking at recruiting. I mean, basically helping people, hiring the right people. This is like something that comes and goes, kind of like trying a lot of these things, right? So I look at people who are onto building something similar in other industry and try to learn from them. I mean, I'm not copy pasting theirs because my industry might be very different from theirs, but trying to get some inspiration, trying to understand what they're doing, how it's working out for them. I think this is really this is for me the most insightful chats I typically have.
Before we wrap up today's show, who has been a leader that has made a lasting impression on you throughout your career?
Yeah, I was thinking about that before as well. I think there are, depending on the phase you are in, there are like different people, right? And like different insight. I think what is always, I think, unique for all of us is kind of like the first boss you're having. And for me specifically, I mean, I said I was part of this open banking company back in the days. It was called Figo. And the person who basically brought me in and was my boss the longest time is a person called Andre Bajorat, who is in the German fintech ecosystem, like extremely well known. And for me, the funny part right now is like he was obviously my boss in the open banking days, and what I think was which I guess it was in me as well, but I think I've seen it with him quite a lot as well. He had the thinking about like, okay, you need to have like a North Star and focus about that, and also say no to opportunities which are not the right fit. And also I think what's really important for a founder, for a leader, is like be really like authentic and stick to your ideals and not deviate from them, because once you deviate from them and others see it, you basically lose your credibility and authenticity. And this might, I don't know, give you a short-term advantage in that specific decisions, but long-term will lose a lot. And I think the funny part for me nowadays is with everything that I'm doing with embedded finance review, actually Andre has built, I mean, something similar in the German ecosystem, just with a pure focus on German fintech with payment and banking. It's a newsletter, a podcast, event series, much bigger audience and all of that. As I never started embedded finance review to become anything like this, now since many years after I left the company and we're not working together anymore, it's funny sometimes now to look back, like I've seen this when he basically built that as well at that point of time. So this is also some inspiration I take from there. But obviously, there have been in later stages, there have been other leaders at companies that I've worked with where I got some inspiration. But I always think like the first one specifically, if you stayed for that one with like 5 years, like in my case, that is something you will always remember.
That's also really funny that you're almost coming back to the similar path throughout your journeys. That's quite interesting.
Wonder why that happens, right? It was meant to be, or there are some other reasons. Who knows?
I love it. Lars, I really enjoyed having you on the show. I really appreciate your time, and we could have continued. You have so many interesting stories and insights in this space. So just thank you so much for joining Pantrium.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed the chat a lot, and yeah.
If this episode gave you something to think about, I'll be really grateful if you could share this with your LinkedIn network. And to make sure you don't miss out on any new episodes, simply follow Pantrium wherever you are listening or watching. And just a note, the opinions and views shared by our guests are entirely their own and don't necessarily represent the businesses they work for. We really hope you enjoyed this episode. Until next time, bye for now.